Okay, this lesson is intended to give you just kind of an introduction to transportation planning. But let's take a look at like kind of what transportation is first. Just I want you to know a couple trends to think about. And when we're talking transportation, we're talking about um, vehicles, public transportation, people moving around. So just some trends since World War II to think about is that automobile ownership skyrocketed. We talked about this more in detail in earlier lessons, earlier chapters. So a lot more people have individual automobiles, right? A lot more cars. And this went hand in hand with suburbanization where each reinforced the other, right? As more people bought cars, they could live further from the urban area. The cars allowed them to move out further into the suburbs. Now, I say these go hand in hand because since housing in these suburban areas were built and spread out, so you move to the suburbs and it's like you need a car to get around. Where maybe before, if you were living in the inner city, you did not need one. So this is why they go hand in hand, and each reinforces the other. You also had a decline in public transportation. Okay, so this is due, you've got your increased auto ownership. Is one thing, you don't need public transportation as much if you have your own vehicle. And then the more spread out pattern of land use, this sprawl, this suburbanization, things are not as compact as they used to be. So those are just a few trends, just big overall things that have shaped how we have to address transportation today. So let's just talk about what is public transportation. We talk about private transportation, like your private car, your automobile, but what is public transportation? We talk about public transportation, just some like terms. It's also called transit. If you hear the word transit, that means public transportation. A lot of times these are categorized into heavy rail versus light rail. If you hear those terms, I just kind of want you to know they mean something specific. So your heavy rails, like your subways, your buses, your whole bus and subway systems. And light rail is going to be more like your streetcars, your trolley-like vehicles. And then there's also commuter rails. You think of this really as kind of these regional modes of transportation, these commuter trains and stuff like that, particularly areas of the Northeast, DC, New York, these type of areas that have these kind of commuter rails. So public transportation, right? Your buses, your subways, your streetcars, your trolleys, these types of things. So transit, I want us to kind of think overall about transit. It's not just cars, it's not just buses. Here is like a growth area in transit that's kind of receiving a lot of attention right now. This term, I don't know if you've heard, is called paratransit or demand response systems. So this is the idea that you would send a vehicle in response to a call. The big difference is they don't operate on a fixed route or schedule, right? You think of your bus system in the city, and you've got your bus schedule and you've got your fixed bus routes. You got to get to the bus stop on time. But this demand response systems are kind of like this picture you see here. And really, this is supposed to be focused on, is called paratransit because it's for those who have disabilities or they're mobility impaired. MITS is one, and mobility impaired transit is what that stands for. The Dial a Ride is a company, type of service, like a Dial a Ride service is how this is. But now, let's talk about it in class about things like Uber, or taxis, but Uber's kind of a newer controversial thing that'd be fun to talk about. So it's this idea that you can kind of dial ride these type of transportation options, whether or not you have a disability, whether or not you're mobility impaired. But and I don't know if you're familiar with the Little Easy here in New Orleans. This is kind of designed around maybe older folks that can't quite get. It's kind of bridges that gap, right, from the bus stop to where your house actually is, because it might not be feasible for everyone to get like from their house to the bus stop. So there's these kind of little shuttle type things that try and fill that gap. So that's kind of a growth area in transit right now. So there's this lot of focus on public transportation, transportation planning. You're going to hear urban planners love transportation. These urbanists like public transportation. So do Americans even want to have an alternative to driving a car? The reality is that most people get to work via their automobile. Most of this is driving alone. That's the majority of Americans. You drive alone. This is how we get to work. But think about some issues that are going on, like this increase in fuel cost. Gas is a lot more expensive than it used to be. Highway congestion. When areas first started, suburbanization kind of first started, or got in with like increased, I would say. You get highway congestion, right? Traffic. This idea of commuting is not necessarily easy, right? You get on the highway and you're just stuck in traffic. I mean, this is not really anything that any American likes. So you've got all this highway congestion, even within suburbs, right? It's not always just this highway congestion from a suburb to the central city. You get highway congestion in between suburban areas too. There's also kind of this increased concern about global warming. This is a global problem tied into energy policy, but there's just more of an increased concern about global warming, about sustainability, about how what are we doing now that's going to affect our future generations, and this is a big concern. There's also influence from other countries. We can look to other countries and see how they're doing public transportation, how they're doing public transportation better, if you want to use that word, than we are here in America. They're being innovative. It's they're being innovative in other countries, particularly like some United Arab Emirates. Some of these nations are doing some really cool stuff. So we have examples from around the world of how we could conceptualize doing transportation differently. You should definitely go check out California, what they're doing over there. Proposition 1A. Go look it up. It's kind of cool. It's kind of like this idea that it's a statewide commitment to public transportation. And your classmates that are from California can tell you more about this. And what about the idea of like an inner city rail service, like trains, a rail service, a streetcar? Do Americans want something like this? And what I'm talking about is like when you travel, let's say you're gonna fly see, I already pushed you there. So when you travel, do you check out airlines or Amtrak? I mean, if you're going home for the summer, you're going home for the holidays, do you go see how much it's going to be to take the Amtrak train, or do you just automatically think, oh, I got to go look up some flights? So, I mean, in America, we fly really when we want to get from state to state. But what if we developed more of a rail service? If there was better options for inner city rail services, do you think that's something Americans want? And then what about new automotive technologies? I don't know how much you guys have heard about driverless cars or just different technologies that are out there right now that we can develop to give us a different alternative to the automobile, to the bus, to the subway. New technologies. So we can talk about more of that. So, a couple political issues before I wrap up this kind of introduction to transportation here. So, let's think about some political issues. Who pays? Who pays for transportation? It's always about the money, isn't it? But this is a big concern. So, think about this: private transportation, your automobile, it's primarily paid for by those who use it. And what I mean by this is if you are going to drive a car, right? You're going to pay for the car. You as an individual are going to purchase the vehicle that you use. You're going to buy the gas. You're going to pay to maintain it. You pay for your oil changes. If something breaks, you go find a mechanic. You pay for that. You buy your insurance. Each individual, you pay for your insurance. If you need to pay for parking, you pay for parking. You pay the, wherever you're going, whether this is monthly parking spots, you can go to downtown to work, or if this is just paying that parking meter so you can go out somewhere. So each individual, think about that. Using your car, it's paid for by those who use it. So even highways are really paid for by a use tax, right? By a tax on those who use it. So this is stuff like your license, your registration, paying for brake tags. Yeah, paying for brake tags, paying for tolls and gas. So really those who use the streets are paying for the highways too. And then public transportation is paid for with subsidies. That's the difference. So you think about public transportation and it's paid for with subsidies like public subsidies. So the problem here is with public transportation, the fares don't cover the expenses. So those couple dollars you pay to ride the streetcar or to ride the subway, all the people paying for fares don't cover what it costs to run the whole thing. So there's a couple reasons why we would want to subsidize transit. One is to the society should provide the young, old, disabled, anyone who can't afford a car or doesn't have access to driving a personal vehicle, they need an option. Two is to improve circulation. Circulation is moving, like the movement of people and traffic and things through cities, through areas. Another reason would to be improve environmental quality, right? Cut down on all the um, kind of emissions from cars, all the gas. I mean, think of all the pollution that comes out of a car to kind of cut down on that. And then urban planners, they just like compact urban designs. They like to design transportation so that things aren't all spread out and sprawly. Okay, just a couple more thoughts about the political context. This is your last slide for this lesson. Is that by the 1980s, the interstate highway system was pretty much complete. So the federal government being involved in building the highways, we're not really building any new interstates, right? Really, what we do now is focus on maintaining what we already have. Just kind of another part of the political context is that Congress doesn't really support public transportation. I mean, you can go look at what Congress does. I mean, in comparison, Congress supports military spending. Congress does not really support public transportation. Um, and then just one piece of legislation for you to know about. It's called ICE-T, the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act. It's pronounced ICE-T. That was in 1991. Really was major legislation for transportation. So this gave 24 billion in flexible funds for transportation projects. So by flexible funds, it means that kind of local municipalities could build what they wanted to. This could be kind of improving highways, making bike paths. I know that's really trendy is to make bike paths. So those are some kind of like really that's really the only current major legislation that affects transit, public transportation. So that's a few introductory thoughts on transportation, and next lesson we'll get more into kind of the planning process for transportation.